Hello and welcome back to Aetheral Space 9.23, my time. We are back.
Yes, welcome back. You don't get a recap because you shouldn't have watched this episode before the other one, so you just have to remember what happened.
Remember the watching order, please.
Yeah. Try not to fuck it up this time. Okay. Without further ado, let's
You do remember what happened last time though, right?
Yeah. Dragon and Muzazi are both going to try and get Mila for different reasons. Skipper was going to do some other shit with... Not Paradisus, but he's like doing something to like bait them out. He's like doing the hard way.
Yeah. And then Aiden did his little magic item and turned everyone's Aether off in the building. Right as Muzazi and Dragon.
Yeah, and Muzazi was like, "It's okay, I'm a true swordsman. This will be fine."
Little Oreo face.
And then got shot 13 times at the back of an Applebee's.
Pulled up.
Pulled up to the after party. Oh my god, Muzazi with the Leorio face with that song in the rotate. I want it so bad now. Once there was a great kingdom, with borders and lands expansive and bountiful. The people were humble and hard-working, and the warriors stout and strong. Although some times were hard, they made it through the winters through perseverance and pluck. The king of these lands, however, found himself dissatisfied by this humble life. He feared that history would grant him no accolades, and that his name would fade long before the warmth of his cadaver. Soon these thoughts kept him awake at night, and his days were spent shivering in fear of the inevitable darkness. When these thoughts reached its peak, he saw a girl standing before the throne. She wore a dress like cobwebs, and shadows hung over her face like a veil. The king squealed and retreated into his seat, staring at her. "Who are you?" he cried. "What is your name?" The girl smiled. "Create a perfect kingdom to outdo me," she promised, "and I will show you who I am." Book of Silencio, heretical text. Ruth gulped down her booze and slammed her glass down on the table, restraining her strength only enough to not to smash either. Curious, what's the age to drink in Aetheral world? Or is it different based on what kingdom you're in? What is it right now where they're at?
In the final church, well, depends on which sect controls it.
Which sect is she on?
Well, she's in the true meets, so they're all sort of together, so it depends which build it is.
Oh my god, this guy does not want to give me
18.
an answer to my question.
18.
18. There we go. Downtime didn't agree with her. Even here, sitting in this bar, her blood was boiling, pushing her to go out and do something. Intellectually, she understood that they needed to hide out, lay low. But even so, time seemed to stretch on into infinity. If she had any idea of how long she'd be hiding out, or what the objective of all this was, it might have been a different story. But as things were now, the whole exercise just felt tedious. The bar she was in, the Neon Demon, was a converted passenger cruiser now fully stocked with serving out automatics and slot machines. People from all across the Final Church territories milled about the bar floor, humanists and superbians sticking to their little cliques. Ruth herself had taken a little booth in the corner, where she had a good view of the entrance. Could never be too careful. She swiped two of her fingers over a sensor on the table, reordering her drink. I like that. That's a cool visual. If there was nothing else for her to do, she might as well get wasted. It was what everyone else did, after all. So true, bestie. Mind if I... I'm just going to do a generic voice. Mind if I join you?
Oh my god, it's
Red Aether sparked.
It's an isekai pro tag, just like a guy.
I don't know who it is! Red Aether sparked around her, her heart skipping a beat in surprise. She wasn't that drunk. She'd been keeping careful watch over her surroundings, listening to the babble bouncing through the bar. And yet, without her so much as noticing, someone had set themselves down right across from her. A very unusual-looking someone. He was clad from head to toe in red and black, a spandex suit covering his body, and a bulky helmet covering his face. A white square right in the center of that helmet was the closest thing to a visible face. He carefully poured his own drink into a slot on the side of that helmet as he drummed his free fingers against the table, looking right at Ruth. At least, she thought he was looking right at her. It was hard to tell without visible eyes. Ruth frowned, leaning over the table, palm flat over the rim of her spent glass. "Looks like you've already joined me. What's up?" Nothing much, the man said from the sound of his voice. He was relatively young. He sounded relaxed, too, the helmet he was wearing not muffling his words in the least. I just thought you seemed like an interesting person. Places like this are really for meeting people, right? In nature, all the different animals gather at the watering holes. It's just like that. Ruth raised a skeptical eyebrow. If you say so, man. And what is it that seems so interesting about me, then? Was this guy hitting on her or something? Well, the young man leaned back in his seat. For one, you obviously know what you're doing. I was planning to sit here since I'd have a good view of all the entrances, but you'd already beat me to it. Shows tactical awareness, right? This would be so weird if they just decided to sit there randomly. Like, how could he know? You know what I mean?
Because he's got,
just a person.
He's got she, he can tell. I can tell your senses sharpened to their maximum.
Wow, you seem combat ready. A smirk spread across Ruth's face, but she shrugged as if it were no big deal. Isn't difficult. You'd be surprised, the man said, twisting in his seat to look back at the main entrance. See those mercs there near the front? Some guy from Shooting Star Security Solutions. Hey, that's a throwback to Arc 3, I think. Indeed, Ruth recognized their red armor from back on Talbot. 3 men laughing and drinking booze in a booth right next to their door. Right next to their door. 2 helmets rested on the table between them. Her eyes flipped back to the masked man. Yeah? What about them? With a sigh, he planted something in front of him. The 3rd helmet, which he'd been holding under the table. They didn't even notice me grab this, he chuckled as he patted it. Amateurs like that are only good for bragging about the things other people have ordered them to do. Just faceless corporations. Is this the cyberpunk guy? Faceless, Ruth scoffed. You can't really talk, can you? The masked man cocked his head. What do you mean? He sounded genuinely confused. Ruth pointed to his mask, her brow furrowed. Oh, this? He replied, tapping the item in question. This is just my own face. No choice but to keep it on, I'm afraid. Religious reasons. Ruth crossed her arms. Never heard about anything like that in the Final Church. Ain't from the Final Church. Yours truly is a legal citizen of Facade Opera, one of the UAP's Big 10. We make our own faces. In a way, he tapped the side of his mask, this one's better than what's beneath. That's just meat and bone and stuff. Whereas this is something I've made with my own hands. Don't you think? Ruth blinked. I guess. Plus, it's convenient not to have all your emotions on display like with you faceless. Okay, so that's like his name for people who don't have the helmet? Yeah. Okay, that took me a second. If you say so, Ruth said, accepting her new drink.
If that was from his perspective, there would have been a capital F.
You still haven't told me what you want, though. Believe it or not, I'm in the same business as those bozos, he said, jerking a thumb over his shoulder to indicate the S4 goons. Only I prefer to work for myself. Small jobs, and I have to go where the work takes me, but it lets me pick and choose based on what I'm comfortable with. Like I said, you seem like you can handle yourself. You ever consider mercenary work? Oh, he wasn't flirting at all. This was recruitment. Oh, hang on, I can hear myself in your headphones. Wow. In your mic. No, I'm good now. Ruth smirked ruefully. Sorry, I got previous obligations. She could hardly juggle assassinating the Supreme with guarding cargo shipments, after all. The man sighed. Really? You're sure? That Aether you showed off seemed pretty potent, too. I'd hate to lose the opportunity for a good partnership. Damn it. She let it spark for a second, just by reflex, when he'd made his presence known. The smirk dropped from Ruth's face. You know about Aether? Wait, is it like secret?
Was like...
Oh. I feel like every single person we've ever met has known what Aether is. She's like, holy shit, you know about Aether?
It's like a rando in a bar, though.
I guess, but even still, don't the people generally know about it? Wasn't it like a big factor in their history in overthrowing the gene tyrants and whatnot?
Well, it's like they knew like people have like wacky powers. They don't know like the mechanics usually.
I suppose. I guess, you know what? I say that, but I guess there are a lot of people who know the broad idea of like what hacking is, but have no idea what hacking is. Mm. They're just like, yeah, you fucking went into the mainframe.
You're constant, right? Just hack
it. He chuckled. Of course I do. The days of Aether being some secret for the cherished few are long gone. Information leaks out over time. Cultures and individuals develop their own styles around it. The supremacy can kid themselves into still thinking they're special, but it's just a delusion. Give it 20, 30 years, and I'll bet anything it'll be a matter of public record. It's not already? How was Dragon self-studying it? Well, he was a Supreme Soldier.
Yeah.
What the fuck? Okay, you've drastically, I feel like, at least from what I was assuming, have changed how Aether is seen.
You were complaining non-stop, like, you said it was a secret, but everyone knows about it.
Yeah, but now you for the last 9 arcs, everyone has known about it, and now it's like, well, Aether's not even on the public record, baby.
Oh, that was already established, you just forgot.
Oh my god. Okay, everyone in the comments or the Aetheral Space chat this week, let me know if Tan Honey is mentally insane or not. Okay? Okay. I totally forgot. Oh, Ruth. Gotta say, you sound pretty confident in that. He stood up from the table, cracking his neck. I can't do like a masculine, feminine voice, if that makes sense. So I'm just giving her a masculine voice. It's too hard. Of course I am. Aether's the great equalizer, right? We're just sitting around waiting for everyone to realize it. He fished around in his pocket for a moment, pulling free a pale business card and tossing it down on the table. Anyway, I won't take up more of your time. Look me up if you change your mind. As the masked man sauntered away, stolen helmet tucked under his arm, Ruth glanced down at the card. Oh no! It's her long-lost brother from another timeline! I can't believe you brought it back. Rex Restarosi, an independent military operator, PL9266CD8921. You brought back Restarosi?
I like the name, what can I say?
And it's alliteration, too. This guy. Oh, man. That's a throwback. Only true Aether heads get that.
That's the very deep on the Aether iceberg.
Maybe a name to remember. I would also, personal recommendation, remove the any after mine, because I don't think that's a phrase. Look me up if you change your mind, any.
Yeah.
Alright. Atoy Muzazi began his work. As he smashed through the wooden door, he slammed his shoulder into the face of the officer beyond. Does that officer have a helmet? Didn't think so, idiot. Charging him into the hallway wall. As the unfortunate man was slammed against the surface, Muzazi's hand whipped out and snatched the pistol from his faltering hand. He flipped it around in his grip, holding it by the barrel as a melee weapon. An attack from behind. Even without Aether, his senses were sharpened to their utmost. Muzazi grasped the first officer by his collar and swung him around, using the man as a shield against the baton that had been aimed at the back of his head. The officer with the baton hesitated, unwilling to strike his comrade, and Muzazi took the opportunity. He kicked the unconscious man into the baton wielder with all his strength, sending the two men falling to the floor. Then, before his enemy could rise, Muzazi kicked him in the side of the head, knocking him out cold too. All of this took about 6 seconds. There were 4 more officers. D&D combat be like. The officer near the back of the hallway.
2 seconds passed.
He's fucking... He's doing the fucking cyberpunk Sandevistan. The officer near the back of the hallway fired his pistol, and Muzazi ducked to avoid it, but too slow as the plasma fire thudded into his left arm. The pistol slipped from his spasming grip, just as it had done with its original owner. However, Atoy Muzazi was not finished using it. He kicked the weapon like a soccer ball, eyes fixed on his ranged assailant, and it flew down the hallway, striking the man in the chin and sending him staggering back. A moment's respite from the plasma shots, but not a break from combat altogether. One of the officers charged Muzazi, tackling him to the ground and doing his best to get him into a headlock. It was a clumsy maneuver, born of panic. They obviously hadn't expected Muzazi to be this adept, and so a vulnerability quickly exposed itself. As the officer was wrestling with Muzazi, their heads came dangerously close together. Right now, he wasn't in the mood to overlook that. Muzazi lunged forward and bit down, gripping the officer's ear in his teeth, and then, before his enemy could even realize what had happened, he pulled back. The officer screamed as his ear tore, and Muzazi tasted the copper of blood on his tongue. Jesus Christ! What happened to honorable combat, Muzazi? What the fuck was that?
4v1, he got to do what he got to do.
The fuck? All grappling was forgotten as the man rushed to free himself from Muzazi's jaws, and Muzazi took that opportunity as well. As he released the man's ear, he smashed his head forward into the enemies, sending him into unconsciousness as well. Before Muzazi could rise to his feet, however, 2 more of the officers were upon him. He's got that fucking dog in him, battering his body with their batons. He felt a rib crack as one blow struck true, and for the first time a groan of pain escaped his throat. He didn't have the time to indulge it, though. He had to keep fighting. He had to keep fighting. The 2 batons came down as one, and Muzazi seized them in midair, stopping them from striking him. At the same time, he kicked out, catching the nearest officer right in the back of the knee. There was a satisfying crunch as the man crumpled to the ground, screaming in agony. One baton was now free, and so Muzazi used it to deflect another incoming shot from the ranged officer. Did he fucking bat away a plasma fire,
yes.
bullet with baton? How fast do the plasma shots go?
Well, it depends on the gun.
Do they go bullet speed?
A bit slower than a bullet.
Okay. I'm just gonna roll with it, because he's Muzazi. Steaming plasma dripped from the weapon, and Muzazi could feel it losing cohesion in his hand, and so he hurled it at the face of the other baton user, causing him to stumble backwards as the front of his uniform caught fire. Desperately, he patted down his burning clothes, leaving him vulnerable to a punch right in the jaw. He went down too. Only the pistol user was still standing, and as Muzazi swung around to face him, another shot brushed past the side of his head, singeing his hair. There was no need for words. Muzazi charged wordlessly. His mouth...
Sorry, that's my mistake.
No, you're good. I was about to say, I thought that was a little excessive. Muzazi charged silently, his mouth a flat line of concealed pain, and slammed right into the officer. Without much difficulty, he forced the unfortunate man into an arm lock, causing him to drop the gun, and hissed into his ear from behind. "The prisoner, where?" The officer swallowed. "Forget it! I won't!" A twist was all it took to snap the man's arm. "Where?" Muzazi shouted. "Third floor! Temporary holding cells next to processing! Why, please!" This time he was much more cooperative. Muzazi pushed him forwards, and then, with an elbow to the back of his head, put him to sleep as well. A kick to the one with the broken leg sufficed to subdue him as well. Finally, Muzazi felt free to let out a breath. I would change one of those as-wells, but that's preference. A broken rib and a disabled left arm, not to mention the injuries he no doubt hadn't noticed yet. It had been a long time since he'd last fought without Aether. It seemed he'd become more reckless with his body than he'd anticipated. His body stiffened as he caught his breath. More footsteps approaching, more than last time. He'd expected this, but it seemed that group hadn't been the full security response. Just those 5 had taken all he had. Fighting a larger group in his current condition wasn't a risk he was willing to take. Muzazi winced as he cracked his neck, and then he turned on his heel, running in the opposite direction from the incoming footsteps. If nothing else, he'd lead them on a merry chase. Popcorn in my throat.
No problem, I just realised just those 6 it should be.
Those 6.
Aiden's fingers drummed against the wooden desk as he watched the intruder on the security monitors, his heart dropping with each blow. It was definitely the swordsman he'd seen on previous footage, even if he didn't seem to be using a sword right now. Even with the Apex Bishop's talisman disabling his Aether, he'd brawled his way through 6 trained officers without any difficulty at all.
Guy who counts.
Sweat trickled down his forehead. No, things weren't meant to be going like this. That had been his trump card. What was he supposed to do now? What the hell was Gresham doing, chasing that infiltrator through the halls like an idiot? Was he trying to make Aiden look bad or something? He rummaged around his pockets again, pulling free the other talisman that Gertrude had given him. The severed finger of Helga Malwarian, bound with a similar strip of Everwire. Could this get him out of this unfair situation? Gertrude had said... Damn it, he'd forgotten an exact word, but she'd said it would help him, right? Wait, no, he couldn't use it. He'd already used the fingernail to nullify Aether in the building. Whatever this other talisman did, it wouldn't work. Idiot. Idiot! Fumbled. Whatever. This was still winnable.
Fucking video game!
Gresham and his men would word the enemy down over time, no matter how many of them were taking out copium. It would take a little longer, but they'd still win. He'd still win. He'd show them what he was made of. Aiden rose from his position, hunched over the desk, only to feel the barrel of a pistol press against the back of his head. "Don't move," said a quiet voice from behind him. "Move and I'll kill you right away. Say okay if you understand me." Aiden's voice was like cracking ice. Okay. His heart beat like a hammer in his chest, accompanied by a dull pain. It was taking nearly all his strength to prevent himself from hyperventilating. The voice behind him, it sounded familiar, but with the panic racing through him, he couldn't place it.
Oh, it's Dragon.
At any rate, it seemed the voice couldn't resist a little gloating. "You should have used that fingernail thing earlier. You would have killed me, but I was already in the room." "Yes, very familiar." "What do you want?" Aiden whispered, keeping as still as he could. He didn't want to agitate this person. "Mila Green, where is she?" Aiden blinked. Of course, the swordsman wasn't working alone. He was a distraction while his partner snuck in to capture the enemy general. "Why do you want to know?" "That's one strike," the voice said, dripping danger. "You get free. Where is Mila Green?" The words came out fast and without dignity. Next to processing, etc. on the 3rd floor. Temporary holding cells. That's where we put her. That's more like it.
Like,
If I break that fingernail thing, will the Aether come back? Aiden swallowed. I don't know. Pick it up and give it here. If you try anything, I'll kill you. Slowly, with trembling hands, Aiden reached down to the desk and plucked the fingernail free, holding it between 2 of his fingers. He turned, careful not to make any sudden moves, extending the nail out in offering. And then he saw. He saw the face of the person threatening him. Dragan Hadrian, the one who brought Samuel Ambrosius to Yoslov, the one responsible for all the death and destruction there. For a split second, Hadrian's eyes flicked over to one of the security monitors, to the figure of the swordsman running down the hallways. What? He muttered. He's... Aiden charged. There was no strategy or technique to it, just him slamming his body into the enemy. But with the element of surprise and the lack of Aether, that was enough. The 2 of them went crashing down to the floor, Hadrian's gun sliding across the room. Aiden quickly stuffed the fingernail to his pocket before climbing up atop the conscience, raining down a storm of clumsy blows. Hadrian raised his arms to protect his face, but the punches aimed for his chest and stomach met their mark. Aiden reached for his own holstered pistol, but when Hadrian saw the opening, he quickly pushed, attempting to reverse their positions. Roaring in fury, Aiden grappled with Hadrian, pushing his arms down as he did his best to prevent Hadrian from getting up. Let me just correct that. Hadrian and then him. It should be.
nice.
Fuck you, he snarled as Hadrian's hands struck his face. Fuck you! Dragan Hadrian was like dignity 0 for both of them. Dragan Hadrian was like a cornered animal. As Hadrian reached out to throttle his enemy, Hadrian turned his head and bit down on the incoming arm, hard enough to soak his teeth with blood. Aiden screamed, doing his utmost to pull himself free, but Hadrian refused to let go. In the end, he took a swift kick to the conscience's groin to force him to release Aiden from his jaws. Aiden staggered up and backwards against the desk, nursing his bleeding arm, but Hadrian was not done. With a movement like lightning, he kicked out with one leg, striking Aiden right in the hip. It was a resounding crack. His face went pale. That was not the crack of bone, nor had Hadrian been aiming for his hip. That had been Aiden Blaze's pocket, and that sound had been the crack of a fingernail. Aether began to spark.
How does a fingernail cracking resound?
Because it's mad. There's so much killing intent. Aether began to spark.
So true.
Muzazi's brow furrowed as his Aether returned, white light bathing the whole way around him. He didn't know why his power had come back, but he wasn't about to miss the opportunity. Immediately he turned on his heel, shoes squeaking against the polished floor as he faced his pursuers. As he'd made his way through the building, he'd managed to take down 1 or 2 of the chasing officers in brief confrontations. Now then, he could truly let loose. 10 pursuers remained, their pistols and rifles aimed right for him. Behind them was their commander, a scruffy-looking man with thick sideburns, brown Aether sparking around his hands. He'd be the one to watch out for. Fingers pulled triggers, and the toy Muzazi got to work. Plasma fire sailed over his head as he dropped to the ground with Aether-infused speed, slamming his palm against the floor tile. With another spark of Aether, he implanted his thrusters in the underside of the tile, causing it to tear itself free from the ground and zoom down the hallway as mobile cover. As he ran behind it, using his fists and feet to subdue any officers who were still conscious after the tile slammed into them. His cover made it around halfway down the hallway before finally succumbing to the plasma and melting, leaving Muzazi only a few metres away from the commander. Apart from him, 2 main officers were still standing. Muzazi caught a rifle being swung towards his head by one of them, and with a burst of silver strength, snapped the barrel straight off, smashing it against his assailant's nose. The man's scream echoed through the building.
I'm so sorry to do this, but do you guys really spell meters with the R before the E?
Yeah, we spell it correctly.
Is that how it's been in all of AS?
Yeah.
I haven't noticed that. Okay.
It's spelled differently in the Final Church, that's probably why.
Okay.
As he fought, he kept careful watch on the man with the sideburns. Countless tiles, like something from a board game, had manifested out of his Aether, floating in the air around him in a spherical formation. Each tile bore a letter, and the commander was carefully plucking the tiles one by one, using them to form a word that floated behind his head. Para, the word read. Clearly it wasn't finished yet. Muzazi got the distinct sense that allowing it to complete would be bad for him. He finished off the first officer with a kick to the stomach that sent him flying down the hallway. Then he turned to the second.
Is he playing Scrabble?
He is playing Scrabble. Then he turned to the second, catching a plasma shot in his Aether-infused grip and hurling it at the officer's feet, the pain causing him to crumple to the ground. Another glance. The commander was making quick progress. the word read. Paralysed? Was that the word being assembled? If it was completed, would this man's ability cause it to happen? If that was the case, Muzazi couldn't waste time. He leapt over the prone guard, thrusters atop his leg, bringing down a devastating knee drop onto his torso. The man chuckled, yoked and spluttered, falling back as he was thoroughly taken out of the fight. More thrusters immediately sprung Muzazi back to his feet, and he began his final charge towards the commander. The older man was hastily looking for his floating tiles, searching for the final 2 tiles that would complete his attack. That should be paralysed then. E and D, or perhaps just E if the word he was assembling was simply paralyse. Muzazi might not have much time as he expected. As he approached, the commander pulled his pistol free of its holster and fired a volley of rounds towards him. Muzazi dodged aside, narrowly avoiding them, and for a moment his thrusters permitted him to sneer at gravity, allowing him to run along the surface of the wall. As he kicked off, he zoomed towards the enemy with thrusters blasting at the soles of his feet. He kicked, his leg crashing through the floating tile and narrowly missing the enemy's chin as he dodged back. Muzazi smirked. It was unfortunate that he'd missed, but the enemy had never been his true targets. Tiny thrusters erupted from the floating tiles his leg had made contact with, sending them flying in every direction, the final letters now fully out of reach. Then Muzazi charged forward again, split-second thrusters accelerating his movements. The pistol came up one foot at a time, but a shining white fist was firm enough to shatter it. And as the enemy's terrified face grew larger in vision, Muzazi knew he'd won. He kicked again.
Was Scrabble guy Grisham?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
This time upwards, with all his strength and flexibility, striking the Aether user in the chin and sending flying into the ceiling. A second later, he fell back down, still, save for his ragged breathing. He wouldn't be moving anytime soon. Toy Muzazi let out another deep breath. With Aether returned...
I think you need a comma after still, right? Because there's a pause. Still. He fell back down still, comma, save for his ragged breathing.
I don't think so. He's still safe.
Otherwise it's he fell back down, still safe for his ragged
That's right.
breathing.
He is still, except for his ragged breathing.
Right. So you because you're adding the remark after still, save for, it would be the comma goes after still.
You say so. With his
you know what? Do it as you please.
With his Aether returned to him, he could feel the pain of his injuries easing. He'd need better treatment to heal them fully, but for the time being he could move. And he had to. He still had a job to do, after all. Eliminate Neela Green. Muzazi unsheathed his black blade.
Nice. I'd also remove the comma after a second later. A second later he fell back down, still, save for his ragged breathing.
Okay.
There you go. That was pretty good. A really fight heavy. But you know, it was fun. And Grisham had a neat power, I like that. Very strong, it seems.
Yeah, I think you can play Scrabble.
But he can play Scrabble with the best of them. It'd be really funny if like his power was Scrabble, but he was really bad at Scrabble.
But do you have a question for me, Darnell? Any kind of lore questions or anything?
Yeah, why did Grisham base his power around Scrabble?
It's
What's
his
the
favourite
backstory
game as a
around
kid.
that? Is it
He
called
used to
Scrabble
play
in this
it with his
universe, or do
sister
they
who
have like
mysteriously
a...
disappeared.
Oh. Do they have like a non-copyright version of what the name is, or is it still
Word
just called
Hunt.
Scrabble? Word Hunt. Well, that makes it dangerous.
With each one of these lore files, Gresham's backstory gets more and more involved.
Hell yeah. Alright, well that's it for 9.23, it seems, my time.
Yeah.
And we will see you guys next time, on our time.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye!